Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever feel like you have to do everything all by yourself? Like asking for help is a sign you are not strong enough? Well, this new study digs into why we think that way and what happens when we actually embrace relying on others. Imagine a world where showing you need someone else is seen as a weakness, not a strength. That is the tricky spot many of us are in, especially in societies that really value being independent and self-sufficient. But what if that idea of doing it all alone is actually hurting us? What if learning to accept help and work together could make us more resilient and happier? That is exactly what these researchers set out to explore. They came up with this idea called interdependence acceptance. It is not just knowing we're all connected, it is actually liking it, valuing it, and seeing it as a good thing. It is about being able to receive help without feeling like a failure, and also enjoying the process of cooperating with others. The big question was, can we measure this? And does it actually matter for our well-being? So, to start, they needed a way to measure this interdependence acceptance. They created a questionnaire, kind of like a long survey, with 15 questions. They wanted to make sure this questionnaire really captured what it was supposed to. They tested it with a bunch of students in France. They brainstormed questions that got at different ideas, being okay with getting help, thinking cooperation is a good thing, and genuinely feeling good about helping others. They refined these questions, even had people check them to make sure they made sense to everyone. After giving the survey to students, they ran some fancy math tests. Think of it like sorting a deck of cards into piles based on what is written on them. They found that the questions naturally fell into three main groups or factors. The first group was all about being open to receiving help. Questions like, I am happy to accept help from others, and I don't feel inferior when I ask for help fit here. The second group focused on valuing cooperation. Things like, I enjoy working on tasks as part of a team and collaborating with others leads to better results belonged here. And the third group was about appreciating the act of helping others. Like, helping others makes me happy and gives me a sense of purpose. They did another test to make sure this three-part structure held up, and it did. The questionnaire seemed to be a good way to measure interdependence acceptance. They even checked how reliable it was, and the numbers looked good, meaning if people took the test again, they'd likely get similar results. Okay, so they had their scale. Now, they wanted to see if this interdependence acceptance thing was actually linked to other important parts of our mental lives. They gathered another group of people, a mix of students and workers this time. They checked how much people felt connected to humanity in general. You know, feeling like you are part of something bigger than just yourself. They also looked at self-transcendence, which is like having a sense of connection to something greater than yourself. And they measured egocentrism, which is kind of the opposite, focusing a lot on yourself. They also looked at whether people felt their basic psychological needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness were being met or frustrated. And here is where it got interesting. They found that people who scored higher on interdependence acceptance also tended to feel more connected to humanity and more self-transcendent. That makes sense, right? If you value connection, you'll probably feel more connected. On the flip side, higher interdependence acceptance was linked to less egocentrism. And importantly, it was linked to less frustration of their basic needs, particularly the need for competence. This suggests that accepting interdependence helps people feel more capable, not less. They noticed some differences between the three parts of interdependence acceptance. Being open to receiving help and valuing cooperation seems strongly tied to feeling good about your basic needs, like belonging and competence. But appreciating helping others, that part seemed to be more of a general good-heartedness, less directly tied to your own needs being met. So we know it is linked to feeling good about ourselves and our connections. But does it have a real-world impact? To find out, they looked at burnout among students. Burnout is that feeling of being totally drained, exhausted, and detached from your work or studies. They gave the Interdependence Acceptance Questionnaire to students and also a scale that measures burnout. The idea was to see if accepting interdependence could protect people from burnout. And guess what? They found that students who scored higher on interdependence acceptance reported less burnout. Specifically, they felt less detached from their studies and less inadequate. This was especially true for the openness to receiving help and valuing cooperation parts of interdependence acceptance. They also found that higher interdependence acceptance was linked to more positive feelings and less negative feelings. It seems like being open to others genuinely makes you feel better. To make sure these findings weren't just a fluke or specific to French students, they did a similar study, this time with people in England, including workers. They translated the questionnaire into English and repeated the process. Again, the three-factor structure of the Interdependence Acceptance Questionnaire held up well in English. This tells us the idea of embracing interdependence is likely universal, not just a cultural quirk. And just like with the students, they found that workers who accepted interdependence more readily experienced less burnout. They felt less exhaustion, mental distance from their jobs, and cognitive and emotional impairment. It seems like leaning on others and working together can be a real shield against the stress of demanding jobs. It is important to note the word modest here. It wasn't like accepting interdependence instantly cured all burnout, but it did show a clear, consistent protective effect. So, what is the big takeaway from all of this? The researchers argue that our modern world often pushes this myth of rugged individualism, the idea that you should be able to handle everything on your own. But this study suggests that this myth might actually be harmful. They found that true autonomy isn't about being alone, it is about being able to balance your own actions with participating in a supportive social network. Accepting interdependence doesn't weaken you. It actually makes you stronger by freeing you from the impossible pressure of being perfectly self-sufficient. Think about it this way. The researchers suggest that when we try to be completely independent, it can lead to a lot of anxiety. We worry constantly about failing because we believe success only rests on our own shoulders. Accepting interdependence widens the margin for error. If you know you have support, a single setback doesn't feel like the end of the world. It also tackles guilt and self-blame. When we believe we're solely in control, mistakes can feel like personal failings leading to harsh self-criticism. But if we see outcomes as co-created, it reduces that tendency to blame ourselves or others. This can break the cycle of guilt and resentment that often leads to people pulling away from others. Ultimately, the research concludes that interdependence acceptance isn't just a nice idea, it is a powerful psychological resource. It helps us see that vulnerability and mutual reliance aren't weaknesses, but sources of strength and resilience. It is about reimagining autonomy not as solitary achievement, but as a shared success. The development of the Interdependence Acceptance Questionnaire itself is a big deal, giving scientists a solid tool to study this important psychological trait across different cultures and languages. Now, like all studies, this one has its limitations. The researchers pointed out that their samples had quite a few more women than men. While they didn't find huge gender differences in interdependence acceptance itself, there were some differences in other related measures, and they'd like to see more balanced groups in the future to really understand any gender dynamics. Also, because this was a correlational study, they can't definitively say that accepting interdependence causes reduced burnout. Future studies could try experimental approaches like interventions to boost interdependence to see if that directly leads to better well-being. They also mentioned that for some groups, the burnout levels were pretty low. So replicating this with people experiencing more severe burnout would be really valuable. Finally, since they relied only on self-report questionnaires, future research could explore implicit measures to capture even deeper, perhaps unconscious aspects of accepting interdependence. But even with these nuances, the core message is powerful. It challenges the dominant cultural narrative that emphasizes radical self-reliance. It suggests that by embracing our natural interdependence, we can build stronger relationships, navigate stress more effectively, and ultimately live healthier, more fulfilling lives. It is a call to move away from the idea that asking for help makes you weak, and towards seeing it as a vital part of being human and thriving. What do you guys think about this idea of interdependence acceptance? Does it resonate with your own experiences? Let me know in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown helpful. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more insights into the fascinating world of psychology. We'll see you next time.